Once upon a time, in the mid-19th century, the United States was a divided nation. There were two main regions with different economies, social structures, and political ideologies, the North and the South. The North was a booming industrial powerhouse, with factories, railroads, and bustling cities. The South, on the other hand, was a rural and agricultural society, with large plantations worked by enslaved Africans. The issue of slavery had been a contentious one for decades, but it reached a boiling point in the 1850s, as the country expanded westward and new states were admitted to the Union. The question of whether these new states would allow slavery or not became a major political battleground, pitting the northern anti-slavery forces against the southern pro-slavery advocates. In 1860, a presidential election was held, and Abraham Lincoln, a Republican from Illinois, won the contest. The southern states, fearing that Lincoln would abolish slavery and threaten their way of life, decided to secede from the Union and form their own country, called the Confederate States of America. The Confederate States were led by Jefferson Davis, a former senator from Mississippi, and their capital was located in Richmond, Virginia. The Union States, meanwhile, were led by Lincoln, who pledged to preserve the Union and end the institution of slavery. The stage was set for a brutal and bloody conflict that would become known as the American Civil War. The war began in 1861, with a Confederate attack on a Union fort in Charleston, South Carolina. Over the next 4 years, the two sides fought a series of battles and campaigns, with the Union gradually gaining the upper hand. The war was fought on many fronts, from Virginia to Tennessee to Mississippi to Georgia, and involved hundreds of thousands of soldiers. One of the most famous battles of the war took place at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, in 1863. The Confederate Army, under the command of General Robert E. Lee, launched an invasion of the North, hoping to win a decisive victory and force the Union to sue for peace. The two armies clashed in a 3-day battle that saw heavy casualties on both sides. In the end, the Union emerged victorious, and Lee was forced to retreat back into Virginia. The war dragged on for 2 more years, with the Union gradually gaining the upper hand. The turning point came in 1864, when Lincoln appointed General Ulysses S. Grant as commander of all Union forces. Grant launched a series of coordinated attacks on the Confederacy, eventually capturing Richmond and forcing Lee to surrender at Appomattox Courthouse in April 1865. The war was over, but the toll had been enormous. More than 620,000 soldiers had died, making it the deadliest conflict in American history. The South was devastated, with many cities and towns in ruins and the economy in shambles. The issue of slavery had been settled once and for all, with the passage of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. But the scars of the war would linger for many years to come. The South was occupied by Union forces for several years after the war, and it took decades for the region to recover from the devastation. The issue of civil rights for African Americans would remain a contentious one for many years, leading to the civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s. Today, the American Civil War is remembered as a tragic and tumultuous period in the country's history. But it also represents a turning point, a moment when the country faced its deepest divisions and emerged stronger as a result. It is a reminder that even in the darkest of times, the American spirit can endure and overcome.